Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Scrappy Cinema Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Ritchie, and joining me today is Jeffrey Morris. And the reason I wanted to have Jeffrey on the show is very excited. He's been involved with several independent science slash sci-fi projects through the years, and he's here to tell us about his latest, which is a feature-length documentary called The Eagle Obsession. Jeffrey Morris, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, for people who aren't familiar, give us the quick elevator pitch of what the Eagle Obsession is all about.
Well, the Eagle session is a very personal journey for me. I was like many of us who grew up in the early 1970s. As a child, I was a big space enthusiast, big fan of the NASA missions to the moon that were still going on at the time. It was an amazing period in terms of history and technological progress and pushing the envelope. There were some really cool things happening. Simultaneously, we also had amazing science fiction visions that were going on at the time, like obviously the original Star Trek and reruns. You had some other. There was a show called Space 1999 that I saw when I was about 7 years old, and that show, being that it was set in the year 1999, it felt like a future that I was going to grow up to inhabit in a lot of ways. And on that show, there was a vehicle called an Eagle, which you actually see one right here behind me. The Eagle is this incredible sort of multi-purpose vehicle, this shuttle that could travel between the Earth and the Moon and planets and things like that. When I saw that as a kid, I just became obsessed with it. It was an incredible design. The visual effects were great in the show for the time. And over the years, I've run into so many other people from all around the world who actually love this spaceship just as much as I did, and I was like, why did they like it? Why do we all like this so much? And so I decided to go on a journey to tell that story. Yeah.
And before we go any further, I have to offer you an apology, a mea culpa of sorts. I remember when you first announced this project quite some time ago, and I thought, there's no way. It's not going to happen. This is way too specific. This is not something that's going to have enough people who have any idea what this is about. But I was wrong, and very wrong. And we'll talk a little bit about how you've structured the documentary in a way that I think makes it accessible, whether you have any idea what Space 1999 is or not. But right now, I just want to know more about that journey from, how long did it take you from sort of the inkling of this idea for this documentary to get it across the finish line?
Let's see. I think I first had the idea for it in the late summer 2022, and I was in the midst of building a house with my wife, and we had I was moving offices, setting up my office in different places, and I had this Eagle, this 12-inch die-cast Eagle that I kept bringing with me and setting up on my desk or wherever. So one day I'm looking at this Eagle and I'm like, why do I have this thing? What's this about, right? And that was the beginning of going, wait a minute, there might be something here. And I started thinking about it, the story of all the people I knew who liked it, all the stuff that was going on. But what I realized, I also had, for many years, wanted to tell the story about how science fiction has inspired reality in a lot of ways, right? It's inspired so many people to go into vocations like science and engineering and other aspects, right? It's not just becoming astronauts, right? It's affected our entire civilization in a lot of ways, right? And drives it forward. So I wanted to tell a story that was bigger than just the Eagle, but I thought it'd be interesting if the Eagle was the through line, was kind of the thing that we used to go on this bigger journey. And because the bigger journey is what I'm really about. And so let's see, started kind of putting the idea together in the fall of 22. And then we ended up moving forward with trying to, starting to raise money, structure the film by spring of 2023. And we started filming summer of 2023. So, and then we really, the bulk of the production was through, I think our last major shoot was December of 2024.
Okay.
So through 23 and through 24, we did most of the production, and then 25 was really post production and doing the premieres and test screenings and everything. So, yeah.
And you made the decision the way you structured it that you would be in the film as we follow your journey.
Yeah.
Um, and meeting these folks. And one thing that I find interesting is someone who's done a little bit of documentary work before. You have a lot of walk and talk and sit down interviews, and you make them look very effortless. And I know from experience they are not.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about the process and how you set up these interviews. And I'm also interested about the fact that you were shooting in a lot of different locations with
Mhm.
different DPs, different
Mhm.
local crews, I'm assuming.
Yes.
How did you keep everything looking so great and so coherent across all of those different shoots?
Well, two things. I mean, so let's see. So your first question. Okay. So when it came to the actual look and feel of the movie for the film, yes, I thought it needed to be a personal journey. You needed to follow someone. You needed to have sort of a, and I was inspired to some degree by watching things like Parts Unknown with Anthony Bourdain, or some of these other shows, Stanley Tucci, like when he was with Finding Italy or whatever, things like that. And I was watching those shows and I was like, these guys have a personality and they're traveling, they're talking to people. I was like, I think this would be a lot more accessible for people if instead of this being sort of 60 minutes style, if we were out in the field, we were going places, we were doing things, and also make it very. I'm not normally a documentary filmmaker. I'm a narrative science fiction filmmaker, right? So I wanted it to have scope and feel and to be cinematic and big and not just feel like a little documentary. And I figured that was important as well. So one of the things I did, most of the people that I interview in the film, I had relationships with before we filmed, or I developed relationships and we got to know each other beforehand, so that when we got to the actual filming, it was much more relaxed. And I think that the subjects enjoyed the fact that we weren't so static, that we were actually flowing and moving and we were doing things like that. So that was something that I thought was really important because I wanted this to be natural and I wanted to feel, as opposed to interviews, more like conversations.
Yeah.
So that was important.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It
So
it always feels light on, it feels light, I guess you could say. It's not grounded often with like a talking head video. It's very easy to
no.
feel like that camera's not going to move and nothing's going to happen, and you've kept this dynamic
Well,
quality
when you
to it.
talked about this, wouldn't the idea of a documentary specifically about the eagle? I can't imagine what it would be like from the outside to think, oh my god, this guy's going to make a movie about this obscure spaceship from a sci-fi show, and then if it's going to be these talking heads, this is a disaster. There's nothing good can come of this, right? But no, that was never my intent. I always wanted this to be bigger and flowing. The other thing I would say is, I sent a lot of references. First off, I tried to make sure that each of the crews had the same cameras and the same rigs.
Mhm.
We weren't always exactly the same, but we were close. And I also was extremely rigid about sort of the parameters of what I wanted the cinematography to look like and how it would work. And I intentionally found crews that I felt could fit the style I was looking for as a director. And so that was very important. So each crew, we had a lot of pre-production meetings. We had a lot of reference materials I shared with them. We had kind of had a mood board of all the different kind of looks and feels I wanted the film to have. So they had a chance to see this. So they were up to speed by the time. And then once we successfully finished one segment, we would do some sort of pre-editing, and I would actually show that segment to the next crew, and I go, "Hey, this is what we've been doing. Take a look at this. Let's keep this going." So yeah.
And you mentioned, the production value and sort of elevating it beyond a little documentary. A big part of that would be the special effects shots and
Yeah.
the models. Maybe talk a little bit about how those came about and how you did that.
Sure. Well, it turns out there's a visual effects artist I work with out of Germany. His name is Tobias Richter, and Tobias is very talented. He's worked on a lot of Star Trek projects, and one of his big things recently is all the Star Trek Online stuff and the games, and he builds all kinds of amazing models of spaceships, animates, and things like that. And he's well known sort of fandom. Tobias and I are good friends, and we wanted, he happened to have just built a model of the Eagle a couple of years earlier, and I reached out to him. I was like, man, I'd like to do some original effect shots for this because obviously, 4x3 material shot on 16 millimeter from 1974, 75 is probably not going to cut it in terms of what we want to do cinematically, right? I mean, obviously, as reference for file stock stuff, it's fine, but I wanted to do something that was more contemporary, and I felt like we have an opportunity to show to bring the Eagle up to 21st century standards in a way. And so what I decided to do was, obviously it made more sense to do it as computer generated as opposed to miniatures, although I'm a huge miniature fan. But the constraint I put on the effect shots we actually, I came here in my basement, and we actually used some of my Eagle toys I had, the Eagle models, and we actually shot it took a ton of photos against green screen, and I was able to kind of light it the way I wanted it and get the feel I wanted. And then we actually took those, composited those, and then I was able to give those to Tobias and go, here's the storyboards, here's what I want this to look like. And the number one edict I had was that we respect the original visual effects from the 1970s, and we don't take the Eagle and somehow turn it into a souped up, 21st century video game looking,
Right.
super frenetic, like a lot of visual effects shots with spaceships these days are so fast you can't barely even see what the spaceship looks like, right? So it was important to me to create a sense of flow and lyricism and beauty to the shots, and I think we pulled it off. I was like, let's handle it more like, what if Brian Johnson and his effects team in the 1970s had access to the tools from nowadays, and did it that way. And I think we pulled it off. Yeah. So
Amongst your many interviews, you have Barbara Bain and Nick Tate, who were part of Space 1999.
mhm.
What was their reaction when you first reached out or first told them about this project? I'm curious what they thought about it.
I had gotten to know Nick quite a bit for almost I don't know, 8 months before we actually started filming. So he and I had done some Zoom calls, gotten to know each other. The one thing that he felt was that I took it seriously, and that's what impressed him. It's one thing to have fans say, "I'm going to make this movie." That happens all the time. There's tons of people doing this, and I want to make this fan film, and I want to do this and that. And it's fans who love something, and they're playing and they're doing something. And I'm not disrespecting that. It's fine. But I think the edict I had for everybody was, that's not what I'm doing. I'm actually trying to make an extremely high quality, motion picture quality piece that could stand on its own, that can be shown on a Netflix or an Apple, or shown in theaters, right? That was something, and I also gave them material based upon my career that showed them that I could do it. So then once they saw that and they saw my work and they saw what my vision was, I didn't have a really hard time convincing them to be part of the project. I think it was interesting. Barbara, she and I actually got together and we'd had lunch and spent some time together and got to know each other well before we filmed. I mean, probably, I don't know, a good 4 to 6 months before we filmed. And Barbara and I actually had so much in common in terms of where we grew up and family life and all that. We didn't really talk sci-fi at all. We just talked about being people and getting to know each other. And through that course, I also told her about my friend who you see in the documentary and that sort of thing. So Barbara was super excited and super intrigued about being in the project. She felt it was a really neat sort of, for her, it was new territory, because getting to meet people who were inspired by not just, I love that show, but like, your character actually showed me that I could actually, aspire to become a person like that character in real life. That was an incredible thing, and everything. So, as far as Nick is concerned, just to wrap it up, I think he was just really excited to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about how much he cared about working on that show, and how much impact it had on his life. And I think that was something, and I think that comes through in the film very, very much.
A secret that we don't want too many people to know is, if you want to meet your heroes, make documentaries.
There you go. Yeah. For sure. Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
because it can be, it really adds a level of joy to the
yeah,
process, right?
yeah,
When not only is it a personal voyage or personal journey, but these are people who either you've fostered a relationship with, or that you get to meet, that you've always wanted to meet, and
yes,
you get a great project out of it at the
yes,
same time.
yeah, yeah.
So once you were finished with the project, some nuts and bolts for the filmmakers out there, what was your thought on distribution, film festivals? What were you thinking once you were done with the film?
Well, I saw it, and we've been working it kind of in three phases. Our first phase was really to We intended to obviously put it in festivals, but we also want to get it into broader distribution, of course. But I saw the first phase was just to start testing this with some audiences, and I wasn't trying to do like this Hollywood test audience and then I'll go back and re-edit it kind of thing, but more like just trying to, is this working? Do people get it? And so we did a number over during the course of last summer 2025. We did a number of screenings in a bunch of cities, and those screenings, I had people from completely different walks of life, many of whom came to see the film had never even heard of Space 1999, which was really interesting. And I was pretty nervous about that at first, right? Because the thing, I'll admit to you, there's kind of two sides to this film. It was my concerns were, one, I was like, is this going to be Space 1999 enough for the Space 1999 fans, right? And then is it too Space 1999 for the non-Space 1999 fans, right? So those were two concerns I had. And I will say that the response I got was, first, it was very much, we showed the film to a lot of people who had never heard of it. And I got an incredibly positive response to the film. And people were saying, I actually, people come to me saying, I didn't like science fiction, but I get it now. I had that, several people say that to me. They said, I had a woman, I had several people who were in their 80s and 90s who saw the film, and they were like, I had a kid, my child grew up like you, and I did not understand them. And I kind of almost made fun of them or squelched their dream. And now I feel bad because I see it now. You guys weren't just playing with toys you were imagining this future. You were imagining this world. It was inspiring you. And that was very touching to me to hear that. I've had a lot of women who said, I don't like science fiction, but that movie is so great and so cute. I love it when you're with the kids. And so it ended up having a much more universal appeal, which is great. We got through that phase, and I did some edits and I trimmed the film down a little bit and sped it up some. But then became the phase where we started showing it to Space 1999 fans. There was a 50th anniversary celebration in Los Angeles in September, and I will be honest with you, I had my two most nervous screenings were that 50th anniversary where we showed it twice, and then I showed it in England a few weeks back. And that was, and that's obviously where Space 1999 originates. And I was like, man, we got to get it. So, but I passed the test in both of those. We had, the fans really, really liked it. We had, I've never heard anything negative, that people really, really enjoyed it. And they said that it's exciting for them to get to see the Eagle on the big screen. They learn lots of things that they never knew. I think the personal journey of going to the point of watching a show as a kid and then building a cockpit and then sitting in the cockpit with the actor who played the character, that's something that was very, very universal. They all got it, and everything. So that's it. So from there, we've been in a number of festivals. We've won a bunch of awards. Our festival run started in October, early October. And I think we're 10, 12 awards now or something. And we continue to do that. Right now, the film is under review with a major distributor. And so we're seeing what happens. That's going to be a process by which their community of investors and viewers have to watch and decide what they want to do. But if it passes a certain threshold, which it already did initially, they will consider putting it up for distribution and perhaps putting it in theatrical release as well. We also have a secondary plan potentially where we could do a run on something like Fathom Events, where we show it that way, and then we go from there to Netflix, Amazon kind of distribution. So we're figuring it out. We've got for all the fans out there, people who contributed, we've had it's been a long haul getting the Blu-rays and everything put together. We're going to get those this week. We'll have those in hand and start shipping them out next week. So, which is good.
I thought I had a pretty good knowledge of sci-fi, but I was not familiar with Space 1999.
Okay.
And what a great entry point. I immediately tried to find episodes. I wanted to know more about this show. And one of the things you point out that was part of this show is that we've sadly lost in modern times, and this is a big part of what your film talks about, is the idea of optimistic sci-fi.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, in these times, where you fall on what sci-fi could be doing to maybe bring us together, or at the very least build optimism for folks
Well,
again.
it's interesting. I hope you'll check it out. I will send you I've got a series of essays that I'm doing. I just finished the first one, and it's a long essay, but it talks about the idea that we're 60th anniversary of Star Trek. And I'm sure you're familiar with that show. And it started in 1966, so here we are, 60 years later, and I actually feel like culturally we're further away
Yeah.
from that vision than we ever have been. We're like heading further from it, right?
Right.
And there are people who said to me, "Yeah, but Star Trek has to have in that timeline. There's a World War III, and then the world gets better." I don't personally believe having a World War III is going to be a way to reset humanity. I think a World War III could be the off switch, for us. I think it's a horrific thing. I'm deeply concerned about a lot of things I'm seeing happening around the world and in the U.S. And I think that to some degree, our media is part of the problem, right? We've created a very cynical society in a lot of ways. We don't listen to each other. Things have gotten very negative. We're stuck in these silos. There's a lot. Social media hasn't been helping. I think these are all deep concerns. And one of the things that I'm going to do, I'm writing this series of these 6 essays. I'm going to release them sort of bi-monthly about what the vision of Star Trek meant and how we're off course and what we're going to have to do to get back on course, right? And I try to do these things in a very positive way without, I'm trying not to be partisan or finger pointing or political with it. I think that a lot of this is very universal because at the end of the day, we're all human, and whether we declare ourselves liberal, conservative, right, left, or whatever it is, we're all stuck on this planet. And if we don't figure out how to work through this, we will have blown an opportunity that may not happen very often in the universe. You know what I mean? To have intelligent life and with this kind of capability. And so to answer your question, I think that science fiction, we have to get back to optimistic vision. We have to get back to positive heroes. We have to have, the heroes in recent science fiction, they're so flawed and they're so dark and it's so, troubled. It's troubled individuals. And it almost feels like the catharsis of the writers to me, to a degree, as opposed to, and I feel like when I go back to when I was a kid, you had these aspirational heroes that you looked up to, and yes, they had challenges and they faced issues and they had things that right. But at the end of the day, they started with the right stuff. These were good people. These were people who had it together, and then they went and that they were there because they were the best and brightest, right? And then because they were the best and brightest, when they faced these challenges, they were able to figure out how to work through them and work together. And I feel like we've got to get back to those kinds of aspirational stories and heroes. I think that's something tremendous, really missing from our society. And I almost feel like science fiction nowadays doesn't even know how to do it anymore. Those kinds of stories, and that's my number one mission, is to bring that back.
And I suspect it will be independent producers like yourself, especially as we see, more merging and so forth with studios. I really think there's an opportunity. We know there's a hunger. I feel confident there's a hunger for that kind of content. And, if big studios don't want to touch it, then independent producers might be able to fill that void. So that's one part that gives me hope that we can bring
thank you.
that back.
I made the obsession for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that I wanted people to be able to understand me, my dream, me as a filmmaker, me as a personality and individual, so that hopefully it could open some doors so we could start making some more of this positive media, and everything. So, I resisted the urge with making the Eagle Obsession to get dark with it. Because we could have done that. We actually had versions of the outline that went there to this. Wow, the future's horrible. What are we gonna, But what does that get us? So yeah.
Right. And we know that part.
We already know that part.
We know that part. Yeah,
exactly. We know that part. And I'm not talking about people like living in the clouds or burying their heads in the sand. I'm talking about us rolling up our sleeves and figuring out how to fix things and work together better. So
where can people go to find? I know you're still on the festival circuit. Where can people go to learn more about the movie and where they might be able to check it out?
Really good. There's a link, eagleobsession.com, and that will take you to the whole sort of backstory of the documentary. You get to see who was in it, what we were doing with it, the plans and everything. You also get to see sort of behind the scenes of how we made it, and news and everything and updates. There's plenty on there, actually. It's quite a robust website. I even gave a space for fans to write in and tell their own stories about it on the site. So it's a lot of fun. Another place you can go to just kind of learn about me and my career and my dreams of, in terms of the films I want to produce. You can look at futuredude.com. So that's the other one. So, and Future Dude, that name actually came from a blog that I used to run, and it got some attention. So I decided to actually rename my company with it, which is kind of fun. So that sort of thing. Yeah,
And
popularizing science. Yeah,
and the ego obsession does not end with the ego obsession. Is that right?
that's correct. That's correct. We shot about 30 hours of footage, and we had so
Wow.
much footage that there's kind of two stories. I ended up deciding to kind of pull the nerd story out, going too far into the weeds on the tech or the models or that kind of thing. And I kept the Eagle Obsession more broad appeal, but I've got a film that's going to be much more for the fans themselves. That's going to be cut from segments that have already been edited or other sections. We even shot a little bit more. We're shooting a little bit more for it, and that film will be finished in the spring. So it's called
Well,
Beyond the
Jeffrey, I'll
Eagle.
tell you this: I will not doubt you on this one.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. I really, really do. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. I think that people who were introduced to the Eagle through the Eagle Obsession will enjoy this film, the second one too, which is cool. So yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. Jeffrey, thank you so much. I'm really glad to chat with you, and I hope everyone gets to check out the Eagle Obsession, either at a festival near them or once distribution is in place. I think we need more positive sci-fi, and honestly, there's a whole generation that maybe doesn't even know we used to have positive sci-fi. So you
Absolutely.
really
And I think if I could just digress for one quick
sure.
second, the kids that I showcased in the documentary, the fifth graders, the thing that was interesting about they were blown away to see that 50 years earlier, that was what people thought the future was going to be like. They didn't connect that, and it was an amazing thing to watch those new neural pathways fire for those kids. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I agree with you. I don't think people even know that we used to have the aspirations that we even had. So we got to bring it back. And I think going back to then go forward might be a good idea.
Well, I really enjoyed it, and I think everyone else will as well. And Jeffrey Morris, thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to seeing the next one as well.
Okay, well, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you having me.